We also have heard about purposeful and non-purposeful movement. Maybe purposeful movement is your workout. That's the session that you plan throughout the week. That's your yoga. That's your strength training. So let's write that down. Choose something you enjoy doing. It all works, depends on what you enjoy doing. And then there's also the non-purposeful movement. That's the rest of the movement or activity you get throughout the day. Call that steps if you want. So daily steps. We all heard, well, 10,000 steps is probably a great idea. So go ahead and write down a list of all the things you know to do.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very excited to have a special guest on the line with us. Her name is Sherry Shaban. She is the founder of the Make Peace with Food method and the Make Peace with Food Institute for Behavioral and Subconscious Transformation. She is a certified athletic therapist, osteopath, and hypnotherapist, which I'm super interested in. She brings over 25 years of experience in the health and fitness industry, including owning and operating 2 CrossFit gyms, and her work has been featured globally through her top-ranked podcast called Make Peace with Food, as well as her coaching programs and live workshops. Sherry is passionate about helping both clients and practitioners break free from diet culture, heal trauma, and create lasting transformation through nervous system regulation, subconscious rewiring, and practical behavioral tools. Sherry, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, there's so much good stuff here to cover in such a short period of time. I love how you're bringing together the psychological aspects, the fitness, the nutrition, and kind of helping people maybe understand unconscious beliefs that may be holding them back. So we got a lot to jump into, but why don't we start with a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So I always say I got into the health and fitness space a little bit by accident. When I was growing up, I was that child athlete. I was a tomboy competing against the boys, always trying to outrun them, out push up them. And when I was in high school, I got into varsity sports, and that's what really defined me. I always saw myself as that sporty athlete. And when I was in high school, everything changed because I got hit by a car. And this was a very big pivotal moment in my life because I went on to have 2 back surgeries and then be told that I was never allowed to play sports again because I had a lot of damage in my spine. And if I were to one day become pregnant, this could create a lot of complications. So I listened to doctors' advice for years and years and years and really found myself kind of going down this path that I couldn't recognize. I was starting to hang out with that crowd that, your parents tell you not to hang out with and do those things that your parents tell you not to do. And I just kind of woke up one day in my early 20s and just couldn't recognize myself. I couldn't believe how I had become this version of myself that I would never have imagined. So against doctor's orders, I decided I'm going to go back into the gym and I'm just going to try things out and let's see what happens. And at that point, I was actually doing a master's degree in chemistry. So I knew nothing about fitness. I knew nothing about training or exercise. All I knew was I was living in chronic pain all the time, relying on pain medication all the time, and super out of congruency with who I always believed I would be. So I stuck to it, showing up day after day, copying people around me, movements that I had no idea what they were supposed to do. I just did them. And then within a span of a few months, I found that I was able to get off my pain medication. The pain was gone. And it eventually led me to buying a treadmill and then running 5 minutes at a time until I could finally run a full hour outdoors. And then this changed everything because after this moment, I dropped out of my master's degree. My parents, of course, freaked out. What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And I went back to school and I decided I was going to learn everything I possibly could about the human body. And so I got into exercise science. I became a certified athletic therapist and I took every single course I could on training, on nutrition, and just wanted to learn everything because if I'm going to show people how they can also overcome major injury, then I also want to help guide them around what we're supposed to eat. And this led me to starting personal training companies. I eventually opened CrossFit gyms. And all along the way, being the nerd and the science nerd that I am, I just kept learning. And what I was learning at that point was different diets. And not to date myself, but when I first got into that space, everyone was talking about the low fat diet. So I jumped on that wagon because there was science there. And then after a while, people were saying you should count calories. So then I started doing that. And even though my intention was not to release weight, my intention was really just to find the right way to eat to help my clients. I was trying all of these diets too, because I have to try them if I'm going to share them with people. And then all of a sudden, there was this dude named Atkins who was saying that carbs are very bad and meat is really good and fat is really good. And the science was there. So I jumped on that. And by the time I opened CrossFit gyms, everyone was saying that we should be eating like cavemen. So I started eating like a caveman and stopped eating legumes and all the anti-nutrients that they were talking about. And then all of a sudden they were talking about zones. Then I did the zone, and then they were talking about keto. And then I did the keto, and they were talking about macros. And then I did that. And then for even a minute, I was 100% plant-based. And all along the way, jumping from diet to diet, changing food rules every other week. This was good. This was bad. I actually started to develop a disordered relationship with food. I feared food, and I was constantly obsessed with what to eat, what not to eat. And what used to be that cheat meal on Friday ended up becoming a whole binge weekend because I was so restrictive. I had really brought myself to what I call imposed food scarcity. It's really your body starving, feeling like there is this emergency situation. And the moment that you see food or you have that food that you've been restricting for a long time, then your body eats as though it's the last supper meal. And so as I was doing this, at the same time, coincidentally, I was running these 6-week challenges in my gym and these 28-day transformations where I was giving people these 28-day meal plans or these 6-week meal plans and having them do all these workouts. And there was always some sort of prize to win in the end. And what I started noticing was that people would go through these transformations and these challenges. Sure, they would be successful at releasing weight initially, but then all of a sudden they would just go back to old ways of doing things, regaining the weight back, and then feeling even more confused about food. And that's what really led me to look at behavior, because when you realize that we all know what to do, like it's very rare for me to come across somebody or to meet somebody who doesn't know what to do. We all know what to do. In fact, we probably know too much of what to do. But the gap really is, why don't we do the things we know to do? Why do we self-sabotage? Why do we fear change? Why do we tend to gravitate back to old ways of doing things, even though those things aren't serving us? And initially, what I actually wanted to do was to heal my relationship with food. Full disclosure, I was confused, and I was that person who everyone was coming to for nutrition advice. And yet I was also that person who was driving to a completely different grocery store to buy the foods that I was saying we don't eat, and making sure my clients would never see me do that. So initially, this research and this curiosity was to heal my relationship with food. That's where I started learning a lot more about the nervous system, regulating nervous system, regulating cortisol specifically, what was behind cravings, what was behind the scarcity mindset, and then, of course, balancing and resetting hormones. And not just the sex hormones that we always think about, the estrogen and the testosterone, really talking about cortisol. I'm talking about insulin. I'm talking about ghrelin. I'm talking about leptin. And so learning how to marry those two, working on the nervous system and also balancing hormones, is where now we can address cravings in a very different way, because nobody needs to be told or given more information. That's not the problem. The issue is, why don't we do something with that information that we already know? And generally now it's coming down to behavior. It's coming down to understanding why we self-sabotage and ultimately using our biology to help us regulate instead of working against it with more restriction.
Amazing story, Sherry. So people listening now, they may be thinking like, okay, how do I know, or what are some, like you said, they know what to do, but why aren't they doing it, right? There's this, something I talk about all the time is like, you can have all the advice in the world. And like you said, if you've listened to many episodes of this podcast, you probably have plenty of advice. There's also many different methods you could follow, but if you know what to do, why aren't you doing it? So I'd love to learn a little bit from you about kind of the behavioral side of things, and what are kind of ways that people maybe self-sabotage or behavioral kind of things that people may not realize. Maybe talk a little bit about that. And I know there's also talk about hormones and things like that we can get to after, but would love to hear a little bit your thoughts about like the behavioral side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And the first thing is really, really simple. And this is the way the mind works. It's specifically the unconscious mind. This is the part, by the way, that governs 95% of our choices throughout the day. Our subconscious mind is really the leader. It makes us feel certain things after we're triggered. It gives us our beliefs. It drives our emotions. It drives our behavior. And that's 95% of all the things that we do throughout the day. And here's the thing. If you can't see yourself succeeding in something, it's almost impossible for you to ever commit to it or ever even get started. So that's number one. If you can't see yourself do something, you'll never start. And so when we work with people who, yes, they have these goals, and maybe their goal is to release weight, maybe their goal is to start a business, or maybe their goal is even to write a book. But if they can never see themselves succeeding doing this, then they won't even start. And now that brings us into the second part, and that's fear. And fear is this emotion that really drives our safety. And we don't think about it that way. But whenever we fear something, it's because our nervous system is trying to keep us safe. It's trying to keep us to continue to do the things that we already know, even if those things aren't serving us. And it's doing this because it's just a pattern that it's learned. And there is this part of the brain that is developed by the time that you're 10 years old. And this part of the brain basically holds all of your beliefs about the world. It's the perspective that you have about the world. It is your emotions. It's what you like. It's what you don't like. It's the things that work. It's the things that don't work. And this is called your critical faculty. And this is developed by the time that you're 10. And so when your critical faculty is telling you things are hard, or I can't do that, or I saw my parents do this thing and try and it never worked. And those are the beliefs that you have, even though you may not necessarily be aware of them, then again, you're going to block yourself from even starting that or even trying to achieve that. And of course, make it almost impossible for you to see that you're actually able to visualize success. And so how do we overcome behavior? Well, we have to work with, first of all, the nervous system and understand that the nervous system, and the part of the nervous system that I'm always referring to is the autonomic nervous system. That's the part that is responsible for fight or flight, sympathetic nervous state, or as I call it, protection mode, or parasympathetic, which is rest and digest, or what I call safety mode. And so anytime you have fear or you're driven by fear, then your nervous system is in fight or flight. It's in protection mode. And when you're in protection mode, your cortisol is high. And cortisol has one main role. And the role of cortisol is to ensure your survival. And it does that in many ways. First, it creates first order thinking, meaning you'll think of what comes next, but you won't necessarily think of the outcome or the consequence. And when you're in protection mode, you're also less likely to take risks. You're less likely to create change because you have fear of the unknown. When you are in protection mode, cortisol also is going to drive cravings because cortisol wants to ensure that there is sugar available in the blood at all times in case you need to fight, in case you need to run, in case you need to take sudden action. So the energy is there for you to take right away. And so once we start to unpack that, we can see now how cortisol is the master hormone. It essentially drives all of our behavior, and it is led by fear. And so how do we overcome self-sabotage? Well, that is a two-pronged method. And the first part is getting back to critical faculty, understanding what the unconscious beliefs are. And this is now where hypnotherapy becomes very powerful in doing that. And also editing memories. So again, using hypnotherapy to go back and edit some memories, uncover some unconscious beliefs, and understand how these beliefs are just trying to keep you safe. And then the second part of it, the second approach is addressing the nervous system, is addressing cortisol. And by the way, you know that you are in protection mode based on your sleep, how well you're sleeping. you know you're in protection mode based on your cravings. And if you're self-sabotaging, so again, self-sabotage is just a sign that your body's trying to keep you safe. It's not that your body's rebelling, it's just your biology trying to keep you safe and go back to the old ways of doing things, because there's this unconscious belief that the old way of doing things is the known. It's that known territory. You can guess what's coming next. There's a lot of control there, and there's nothing that is variable in that way of thinking, in that pattern. And so we address the nervous system, and we address the nervous system by regulating cortisol. Another way that you know that you're in protection mode is by monitoring your emotions and your thoughts. When your thoughts are always projected into the future, so that is you having a lot of worry, thinking about a lot of worst case scenarios, always thinking about how things aren't going to work out. You're always problem focused versus solution focused anytime you encounter a life experience. So the more you're noticing like that is your pattern, that you tend to feel stress and anxiety and overwhelm and a lot of doubt and maybe even shame and uncertainty, and that brings up a lot of feelings of fear, then you know that you are in protection mode. And of course, if you're listening to this and you're taking the supplements, I would recommend that the type of supplements that you take also address cortisol. So that's really important. And there's a lot of supplements, adaptogens. There's a lot of things that we also use to help regulate nervous system. So there's many aspects to address here. And what's really important is to see where is the gap for you. If it's your sleep, that's something that you want to address. So taking things and supplements to help improve your sleep, such as magnesium and glycine and different types of supplements help regulate your sleep, because when you improve your sleep, you also regulate cortisol. And when you regulate cortisol, you're going to have better sleep, less cravings the next day. So all of these start to come together. And ultimately, to help drive behavior, it's really all about addressing the fear, addressing what it is that you have a block around, those unconscious beliefs that you may or may not be aware of, and then also bringing cortisol back to baseline. And by the way, protection mode is not a bad thing. Fight or flight is not a bad nervous system state. It just becomes harmful the longer that we're in it. The more chronic it becomes, and then that just becomes our new baseline. It's our new normal. That starts to become the issue. And so we have to be able to play back and forth like a beautiful dance between protection mode and safety mode, and know how to regulate our nervous system quickly through all of our habits and life actions that we're doing.
Wow, I love that. I love this the mental aspect of things as well. Again, there's so many people that talk about nutrition or fitness, but the mental side of things, and like you said, right, how much of potentially emotional eating is goes back to how someone's stress levels, for example, and that's going to be different for each people, right? Like what one person can do, what's stressful for Elon Musk might be different than what's stressful for me, which might be different than what's stressful for someone else. So each person has their own kind of unique situation, and that's why I'm such a big fan of people having coaches and whatever, whether it be personal coaches, life coaches, nutrition and fitness coaching. I'm always a huge fan of that, because those people can help point out potentially, like you mentioned, unconscious beliefs that maybe people are not aware of. And so like maybe we go a little bit down that road, is how can people maybe figure out which unconscious beliefs are sabotaging them? Or do you have any kind of processes or thoughts around that?
Well, most of our beliefs are built in the past. So during that time of childhood. And what's super interesting, and you hit on this too, Tiller, you were saying a lot of times what's behind the emotional eating is this coping mechanism. And that's also super key, because to your point, every single person copes to stress or life events in a very, very different way. And we cope because there's this unconscious belief that emotions are going to kill us. And it's really, really that simple. So when we look at a person who's emotionally eating every single time they're stressed, there's this unconscious belief that stress is very harmful. This feeling is very uncomfortable. It is going to harm me. And the quickest way out is a dopamine hit, which, by the way, comes in different forms. Food is not the only form. It could even be alcohol. It could be shopping, overspending, anything that we overdo, overindulge in becomes our coping mechanism and our dopamine hit. And the more we repeat that, now we call that an addiction, which I don't really like the word. I even like stumble on it because I'm like, my nervous system doesn't even want to say the word addiction, because addiction is just a pattern that's reinforced over and over again. It's a dopamine reward system that you continue to repeat. And again, that breaks it down so differently when you start looking at how I just do this thing to get that good feeling instantly. And there's different ways that we can get those good feelings. Dopamine is not the only way. There is serotonin, which is the feel good hormone that's released from the gut, and 80% of our serotonin is released from the gut. And then there's oxytocin, which is the hormone of love. But the one that we can access the quickest is dopamine. So to get to those unconscious belief, and what's really important here is the word unconscious. It's what you're not aware of. And if you want to really uncover what your unconscious beliefs are, hypnotherapy is a powerful tool. And if you're listening right now and you don't have access to a hypnotherapist, then let's reverse engineer it. What are the patterns that you tend to do over and over again, not just around your nutrition, but also in the different areas of your life? Because how you do anything is how you do everything. So you may notice that you have a pattern of avoidance in your nourishment. Then you have a pattern of avoidance when it comes to your business, or you have a pattern of avoidance that also shows up around your finances. Then it shows up with your partner. It shows up whenever you have a difficult life situation. So there you go. That's already the first sign that there's something happening there. And this is really important because what you're doing is you're creating awareness. And that's really the first step. The first step is create the awareness. Start to notice where you're doing this, because once you become aware, you can't then become unaware. And now you have something to work with. And then start to bring it back. When did I first learn this? When did I learn that facing something challenging is harmful to me? Or why do I believe that stress is going to kill me? Or what do I believe is going to happen if I sit in my stress, or sit in fear, or sit in worry? What's going to happen? And most of us who are emotionally eating have never given our nervous system an opportunity to know what happens on the other side. And again, this comes from childhood and what we've learned in childhood. So you may have grown up in an environment where emotions were bad. You don't express emotions. If you're crying, you better suck it up. Life is hard. Why are you crying? Or if you were going through a difficult life situation, maybe you saw people close to you pass away, or your parents got divorced. Maybe nobody spent time with you to help you emotionally regulate. So your nervous system learned at such a young age that certain emotions are not okay to sit in. And what you learn to do instead is to escape the body, because this is what happens when you're a child. Children actually experience emotional pain and physical pain in the same way. So emotions as a kid, especially intense emotions, again, this is fear, this is worry, this is really you taking on the adult stuff at such a young age, experiencing this. And imagine also if you went through a form of trauma, actually also feels like physical pain. So you've learned to escape. And as a child, you've learned to disconnect from your body. And then as you become older, you now have other access, different access to things. So maybe when you were younger, it was the cookies that mom gave you that got you to disconnect. But then by the time you were a teenager, you got your hands on alcohol and cigarettes. And then by the time you got older, then you got yourself a credit card and you started to overspend. So again, these are just patterns that you can start to become aware of. And I'll always share that reflection. So journaling, reflection is a great way. And then you also owning it. And this is the hard part, that you owning that these choices, especially the self-sabotaging behavior that you do, is something you're choosing to do. And this doesn't create blame. This is not adding blame or saying it's my fault. This is really just owning it. I'm choosing to self-sabotage because what I actually fear or what I'm trying to avoid is this. And now that completely changes the paradigm. And now it starts to create more awareness and curiosity.
Wow. Yeah. And for those listening, I want to really emphasize, a lot of people that I talk to when I mention hypnotherapy, because years ago I was certified in NLP and hypnotherapy, although, as I mentioned to you before, I didn't really do anything with the hypnotherapy aspect of it. But for people listening, if I'm not mistaken, hypnotherapy has been and still is the number one way that people stop smoking. right? And this is some extremely addictive habit that people have that is very hard for them to break. But yet hypnotherapy has huge success rates in helping people to stop smoking. And there's a reason for that. It goes deep into your unconscious mind, subconscious mind, whatever you want to call it. And so there's a lot to it. And so I think, sometimes I tell people hypnosis or hypnotherapy, and they think like of some stage hypnotist, which, first of all, I'm fascinated by stage
Yeah.
hypnotists too, right? Like, it's pretty crazy. But if they can make someone do that on stage in front of hundreds of people, like, imagine what you can do if you actually just sit one-on-one with someone and go deep and actually, kind of create change there. I'd love to hear a little bit about maybe, is that something you're commonly using with kind of people that you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a powerful tool. This is something I've started using over the last maybe 4 or 5 years, and I always felt like that was like the missing tool for massive and rapid change. And it's really neat because I use it one on one, but I also use it in group setting in my memberships. I use it when I'm leading my retreats. And the one on one though is really fascinating because you're getting to what is specifically blocking that person. And it's always something that is perceived from a child perspective, so from the child mind. And maybe some people call this inner child work, but it is an immature mind holding on to beliefs from the past. And it's that belief that's held on from the past that's being repeated over and over and over again. That experience is being repeated over and over again. My parents divorced when I was 7. And so I fear relationships and I don't trust relationships because my parents got divorced and I saw all that. And yet I'm 45. So this is something that I've been repeating since I'm the age of 7, as though I'm still 7 years old and my parents are getting divorced over and over and over and over and over again. And it's the same thing for those who have tried different methods to release weight. Maybe they've tried an old method that didn't work. I shared with you all the different diets that I also tried in the past that don't work, but it's still holding on to that belief and then repeating that belief over and over and over again. But we're not aware that we have these beliefs. And that's where now the hypnotherapy comes in and is so powerful, because hypnotherapy, we're not trying to download extra things into your mind. We're not trying to auto suggest. We're not trying to get you to act like a duck or any of those things that we see on TV, which is fun to watch, but that's not the intention. The intention is to connect the conscious mind, which is the mind that's aware, with the unconscious mind, which is the mind that's not aware. That's where things are just running in the background. So the goal is to connect the two and to create that awareness, and then to find what you've been holding on to. What you've been holding on to could be trauma. What you've been holding on to could be unexpressed emotions from traumatic or past events. It could also be the unconscious beliefs that are coming from that younger mind of yours, from that child mind. And so there's so many beautiful ways to do this. And hypnotherapy also is not a tool that we use to go into the past. It's also a tool that we can use to go into the future. And you being able to see your future self, you being able to see your blocks as you're going down a particular journey or trying to accomplish a particular task.
I absolutely love that. This stuff is so fascinating to me, and I think the impact it could have on certain people specifically as well. Those that, especially if you're listening and you've been trying to kind of achieve certain goals, whether it be fitness, weight, or other, and you've kind of haven't had success. You've been struggling for many years, and you kind of don't know why, and it's kind of frustrating. This kind of work, I think, could be so incredibly powerful. I think it really it's I want to cover some other stuff as well, because I think so much of this stuff is like one-on-one and unique to the person, that really you need to work with an expert like yourself, to help guide you through these kind of things. But I think this is just so fascinating, and it's such an important thing that not many people are talking about, that I think is just incredible. So you got this aspect of the unconscious mind and self-sabotage and emotional kind of situations and things that you're using hypnosis and things like that for as well. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other things. Like, I know you're like you call yourself kind of like anti-diet. You don't like these crash diets. I think there's I haven't seen it yet, but I heard this Biggest Loser documentary on
Oh,
Netflix.
yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
Yeah, right. Like, so people just, this crash dieting, people wreck their hormones, they wreck their metabolism, then they gain the weight back, kind of like what you said. So you've kind of seen it all. You've run 28-day challenges, you've run gyms, you've seen people do the crash calorie cutting that loses weight short term, and then they gain it back and they're frustrated later on. So with all of that, what are you seeing that what is the right way to do this? How do we kind of achieve our fitness goals without counting calorie crash diet kind of thing?
Yeah, great question. And, I did this research recently where it was on the CDC. It was the percent of our population who is categorized overweight and obese. So this is in the United States. However, I'm in Canada and it's exactly the same. And so according to 2024 CDC, it is 73% of the population is obese and overweight. So that already says a lot. Okay. But what's even more interesting is 90% of these people, they know exactly what to do. So it's not a lack of information. And this is coming back now to The Biggest Loser. It's not a lack of information. And I did watch that documentary, and what they were pushing was intense exercise, hours and hours and hours of exercise, and then a caloric deficit. So a restrictive diet, which again is what's been said to us this whole time. Energy in equals energy out. And you got to make sure if you're going to release weight, you got to make sure that the calories that you consume is less than the calories that you burn. And the problem with that is it takes away the role of hormones. So it takes away the role of hormones. So the gap right now, and this is actually something that we're going to see more and more of, but the gap right now is people know what to do, but they're not doing the things that they know to do. So how do we bridge that gap? And clearly, it's not an information problem. It's not that people don't have information. Again, going back to those statistics I just shared. And second of all, now with AI, now with things like ChatGPT, you can ask ChatGPT, hey, based on what you know about me, tell me my macro split and give me a workout plan. And it'll do that within seconds. So that's the other thing too. Any coach right now who's giving people workout programs or nutrition programs, I mean, over time, this is going to start to become obsolete, because now you've got this free thing that's popping out these meal plans and giving you more customized and tailored advice, exactly as, let's say, a nutritionist who's done a precision nutrition certification is going to do. But none of that is important, because again, it's not about lack of information. It's about lack of transformation. And North America, when we look at the diet industry, it is a multi-billion diet industry. So we've got all the diets, we've got all the books, we've got all the experts. And yet every single year, there's still an increase in the people who are overweight and obese. And this has been happening over the last 20, 30 years, especially when, we've talked about low fat diets, we've talked about calorie counting, we've talked about keto, we've talked about paleo, we've talked about all these things. And yet this number is still growing and climbing every year. And so now this is where we have to do something differently, because it's not about the food. I mean, I think it starts to become very, very clear that it's not about the food, and it's about hormones, and it's about the nervous system. And when we talk about the nervous system, it's really the body not feeling safe. A person who has been struggling with their weight for 30 years has a lot of fear and anxiety and confusion and worry about any topic that has to do with their weight, has to do with their size, has to do with calories, has to do with what they eat, what they don't eat. This is now this message that the nervous system feels so much fear around every single time it comes up. So when they see their reflection in the mirror, or they notice that their clothes are getting tighter, or anytime someone talks to them about diet, or they go see their doctor who tells them that they need to release weight, this is what they're hearing all the time. And this whole conversation, this whole topic is so incredibly fearful. It's triggering the nervous system that it is unsafe. So we have to address nervous system. We have to get the body to feel safe. We have to get people to start trusting their bodies again, not trusting a piece of paper that tells them this is how many calories they should eat and this is what they should avoid, but really getting them to tune back into their body. And more importantly, with their hunger cues, with their satiety cues, and with them really choosing foods that their body actually needs for nourishment. And then the other part of it is hormones, because calories don't address hormones. So we already talked about cortisol. Cortisol is the hormone that's driving cravings and getting your body to store body fat, especially around the belly. So if that hormone is not addressed, doesn't matter how many calories you're consuming. And then there's insulin. Insulin is the fat storage hormone. And if we're constantly eating foods that are triggering insulin, we're always putting our body in fat storage mode. So again, it's not about calories in equals calories out, because different calories work with your hormones in different ways. And hormones are the body's messengers. They tell the body, hey, we feel safe, release body fat, because releasing body fat happens in safety. By the way, even safe exercise, meaning exercise isn't like, oh, I got to go run. I hate running, but here I am running on the treadmill. I hate it so much. It's really excitement around running. It's inspired action around running. It's feeling safe around the movement that you're doing or you're choosing that's going to get your body to feel safe to release. So getting your body to feel safe is how you release. But when your body's not feeling safe, when the topic of food and nourishment and exercise is not safe, your body will store. And storage doesn't mean your body's broken. Storage means your body's doing its job, which is to survive, because there's something unsafe in the environment. There could be a famine, there could be war, there could be something going on. And the best chance for you to survive is to have stored energy just in case that does happen.
Mm. Yeah. So what about for yourself? So people listening now and maybe wondering, so what, okay, so I don't want to crash diet, but I do have to eat a little less, don't I? Or like, in order to lose weight, or like, how do I make sure my hormones are most efficient? Obviously we talked about the mental aspect, and you've addressed a lot of that kind of stuff, but on the diet side, kind of like, what's your, well, I guess every person is different. I would ask you, what do you eat in a day? But maybe that differs for many people, or maybe you have kind of like some kind of good advice for people around like, hey, I want to get into better shape. So it's like, wait, so don't crash diet. Okay, so then what do I do exactly?
Yeah. So we all know the basic things, right? So we know we should drink more water, right? So let's write that down on a list, drink more water. Then we know we should eat more plant foods or whole foods. So let's write that down on a list. Let's eat more plant foods. Let's bring more colors into every single meal. We also have heard that we should get at least 7 or 8 hours of restful sleep. Now we've got all these gadgets that help us do that. So let's write that down. We also have heard about purposeful and non-purposeful movement. Maybe purposeful movement is your workout. That's the session that you planned throughout the week. That's your yoga. That's your strength training. So let's write that down. Choose something you enjoy doing. It all works, depends on what you enjoy doing. And then there's also the non-purposeful movement. That's the rest of the movement or activity you get throughout the day. Call that steps if you want. So daily steps. We all heard, well, 10,000 steps is probably a great idea. So go ahead and write down a list of all the things you know to do. And now, instead of subtracting from what you're already doing, I'm going to recommend to add. And this is called the rule of addition before subtraction. So before I stop eating cake after dinner, I'm going to start drinking more water. So what's my goal this week? I'm adding more water. And then next week, I'm adding more color in every single one of my meals. And the week after that, I'm going to add movement. And so what you're doing is you're adding. You're not subtracting anything, because the mind that's reactive, that's self-sabotaging right now, that part of your brain that's been wired for survival, that feels like you've been in a famine, the more you take away from it, the more you create lack and scarcity, the more it's going to react. So you don't want to actually remove that. You don't want to remove anything. And one of the other tools that I share is called the delayed reward tool, which is let's say, want to eat this whole entire row of chocolate chip cookies because I just had a really stressful day at work. Cool. That's okay. Instead of denying yourself those cookies, delay it for just a moment and then sit with yourself and ask yourself the HALT. So HALT, and ask yourself, HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely or tired? And then just delay it and give yourself that opportunity to create a gap or a space between that craving and then fulfilling that craving. So what really helps you with nourishment is, first of all, making sure that all the things that you're doing, you enjoy. If you hate broccoli, don't make yourself eat broccoli. So try to find what works for you. and write down a list of all the things. And this is the procedure that I help my clients walk through. It's called habit stacking. And I follow the rule of addition before subtraction. And here's the beautiful part. Things just weed themselves out naturally. Because when you start adding more water, and you start adding more movement, and you start adding more color, and you start adding more whole foods, all of a sudden your cravings start to shift, and you naturally start to be attracted to different foods, and you start to have an affinity for different things. And then these habits that don't serve you also naturally just start to fall away.
Yeah, yeah, that's good stuff. Um, is there any type, like, what are some of the things in terms of hormones, right? It's such an interesting topic that it seems kind of like there's no one's ever told us, hey, if you eat this food, it's good for your hormones. Or I guess people have said, eat processed foods and sugar, and that's bad for your hormones. But is there anything? How can people? Is there anything diet related? I know obviously sleep is going to be a huge thing. We know the kind of fight or flight and the emotional, mental aspect is going to be a huge thing that you could help people with. But what about on the nutrition side? Is there anything there that's like, how do I make sure I have good hormones based on what I
Mm.
eat or how I like, are there, you ran CrossFit gyms, right? Some people will say, hey, CrossFit people, they go too hard. They crush their bodies. They're always getting injured. They're burning themselves out. People will say things like that. I don't know if it's true or not. You would know better than me. But like, are there things like that? Like, do people burn themselves out and go too hard? Under eating, I heard, can be an issue, especially for women, not taking in enough protein, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so yes, about the some of the CrossFit things that you shared, but also depends on the gym, depends on the environment. The type of gym that I ran was not focused on bringing, let's say, athletes to the games. So it was really catered to the regular population with a lot of rest. And nourishment now, when we look at it, we can also look at it from a hormonal perspective. And so cortisol is naturally high in the morning. So when you wake up, according to your circadian rhythm or your biological clock, naturally cortisol is high. What you could do to mitigate this is to make sure you break your fast within the first hour of waking. So have breakfast within that first hour of waking. Okay. And that's going to address cortisol. Now, let's address leptin. Leptin is the satiety hormone. That's the hormone that's released from fat cells to say, hey, I've had enough. Let's stop eating. If we don't address this in the morning, we're going to see cravings throughout the rest of the day. So how do you address leptin in the morning? So within in that breakfast that we're having, that's within that first hour of waking, we're going to make sure that we have high protein at that time. So we're not just going to have a bowl of cereal. We're not just going to have a slice of toast and jam. We are going to add eggs, or we're going to add a tofu scramble. We're going to add some sort of protein in the morning, a higher amount of protein than we'd have regularly in the day, so that we can create more satiety and we can start to regulate leptin. Now, we're going to also make sure that we don't have ghrelin, which is our hunger hormone, get too high. So instead of waiting hours and hours and hours to eat, where our ghrelin is rising, 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 and then by the time we eat, we're going to have a big binge or tend to overeat. How about we try to have regular feeding windows? So maybe we eat every 2 to 3 hours, like right when you feel like you're starting to get hungry, but you're not hangry yet and about to kill somebody, have your next meal. Now, let's talk about insulin. How can we regulate insulin? Well, insulin is going to peak depending on the amount of glucose that is in your meal or the amount of carbohydrates that's in your meal. So one thing that we want to do with every meal is we want to food pair. That means we want to make sure that we never have any naked carbs, as I call them. So no, if you're going to have an apple, don't just have that apple on its own as a standalone. Maybe add some Greek yogurt to it. Maybe add a handful of almonds so that you pair it with something. And then again, be able to control that glucose release. And so every single meal, if you want it to be hormone friendly, you want to make sure it's complete, because your body doesn't count calories, it counts nutrients. And what it's looking for is your proteins, it's looking for some sort of complex carbohydrates, and it's looking for some color and some fats. So your protein sources can come from different things. Variety is great. And the same thing with your vegetables, variety is great. And your complex carbohydrates can come from things like quinoa or sweet potatoes or rice. And that now becomes a more hormone friendly and stabilizing meal.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Especially, yeah, kind of like not just eating high carb stuff, making sure you got adequate protein. And yeah, it's funny because someone recently asked me like, "Oh, what do you think is a health trend of recently that in 100 years from now or whatever we'll look back and be like, oh, that wasn't a good idea." And again, it's hard to say. And I think intermittent fasting may have a lot of benefits for many people, but I kind of agree with you. It's like if your body's been if you haven't taken in protein for 10 or 12 or 14 hours, your body's starving for protein. And the longer you wait, you may just end up eating a lot more later on. And so I'm
Mhm.
also a big fan of taking in protein. In fact, I don't like eating a big meal first thing in the morning. So I actually blend 40 grams of unflavored protein in my morning coffee. With some healthy fats in there as well, and blend it all up, and that kind of gives me a nice, just it gives me 40 grams right away, right first thing in the
Right.
morning. So yeah.
Yeah. That sounds very leptin stabilizing, and and that's a great example of what works for you. And again, the intermittent fasting, it could be a helpful tool for some people.
Hmm.
And if we follow our biology, then it would look like our feeding window is more during the day where we're active and moving. And then as we get later in the day, that's where our fasting window can start, which is not what we generally see. We generally see break your fast at noon or at 2 or at 4 p.m. But if we actually shift the windows, it could be a helpful tool for us.
Yeah. Oh, gotcha. So eating earlier in the day and maybe stopping to eat at 5 or 6 p.m. and not eating after
Right.
that, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would
Yeah.
make a lot of sense because actually they say you get better sleep if you don't eat for a few hours before
That's right.
bed too. So that could be interesting. Yeah, I like that
That's right.
idea. Sherry, this has been amazing. I know we've only been able to scratch the surface here. I feel like we could go on for hours and hours, but I know we have a schedule to keep here. I want people to know about like your programs and how you help people. Maybe talk your podcast. Talk a little bit about where people can kind of learn more from you, and if people want to sign up for your coaching. Again, I highly recommend when you find someone who knows how to navigate this mental aspect of things, especially when it comes to health, for people who have been struggling for many years. I'm a huge fan. So would love for you to kind of share any resources or coaching or podcasts that you have.
Thank you so much, Taylor. I've enjoyed this conversation too, and I'm kind of sad that we're wrapping it up. So the first place to start is the Make Peace with Food podcast. And if you're feeling like that conversation is resonating, I have a free download for you. If you go to sherryshaban.com/hormone reset, there is a little guide for you to get started. And then for those that are listening and curious a little bit more about maybe becoming a practitioner, there's also an opportunity to learn more about that too on sherryshaban.com.
Amazing. Any social media or anything else you want to shout out?
Yeah, at Sherry Shaban Fitness on Facebook. And then on Instagram, it's Make Peace with Food Official.
Amazing. And you do, if people go to your website, if they do want to work one-on-one with you, is that an option as well?
Yeah, there's an option. There's also membership options. There's different levels of support depending on if a person's looking for one-on-one coaching or check-ins or joining a community. We do have the Make Peace with Food community, and that's a beautiful place too to be connected with like-minded people. We just finished a 6-week hormone reset in there. We're doing a 21-day gut health reset coming up later this year, and we're always doing these different elevations in the group that is fun to do together and really move towards the same objective.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Sherry, thank you so much. Highly encourage people to check out your stuff. I love when we blend the mental with the physical, and you have so much experience from the fitness side and the running these challenges and helping people lose weight and kind of seeing how all that plays out, and then also recognizing the emotional part of it and how powerful that is, and how powerful the unconscious mind is, and how you can help people from that perspective. I think when you bring all of that together, it's really something special. So thank you for what you're doing and all the people you're helping. And I hope we can do this again sometime.
Thank you so much. And thank you also for what you're doing and helping change lives. Keep it going.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, it would really mean a lot to me if you would forward this episode along to any friends, family members, anyone that you think that would get value out of it and learn something important. The mission at Peak Performance is to help people prioritize and transform their health. And so if you think someone will get value, please, please, please do forward this episode along to them. Also, if you could please rate and review and subscribe on whatever podcast player you are listening to this on, we would greatly appreciate that as well. It means a lot. And I want to tell you about a couple of new products that we just released. You can get 20% off your first order at buypeakperformance.com. That's BUY peakperformance.com. We just released a brand new grass-fed beef protein isolate. This is my favorite new protein powder because it's great for muscle building and recovering and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't give the stomach discomfort and gas that a lot of people get from different types of proteins like whey protein. Some types of plant proteins can do the same as well. It seems to be really, really easy on the stomach while still giving all the great benefits of muscle building and everything else that you want from taking in adequate protein. So check out our new beef protein isolate. We have it in unflavored, which I actually mix and blend with my morning coffee every morning. We have a vanilla and we have a chocolate. You can buy it on Amazon, but again, you also do get 20% off your first order at buypeakperformance.com, BUY peakperformance.com. We've also recently released organic mushroom coffee. We have these in Keurig compatible K-cup coffee pods. We have organic mushroom coffee with lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps, turkey tail, and chaga mushrooms blended with the high altitude organic coffee that we've been using and that we've been famous for years. So that's been a big hit, that one as well. You can get on our website or Amazon, any of our products. And of course, we're always famous for our organic green superfood powder that has almost 5,000 reviews on Amazon with a very high star rating. We're known as the best tasting USDA certified organic green superfood powder with over 25 plus organic ingredients. Again, we also have the organic red superfood powder. We still, of course, have the organic plant protein for those who do prefer the plant protein, but I'm really excited about this new beef protein isolate and all of our other products. We do have over 100 products, so just check us out if you type in Peak Performance Supplements on Amazon or if you go to buypeakperformance.com.